my first question to you is, with the TSS yesterday, how did you feel that discussion went? What was your kind of, did it meet with your expectations of what you expected it to be like?
It absolutely did. I mean, it exceeded them. Just for the listeners, the Talent Strategy Summit is just a meeting of clients, potential clients, that's really facilitated by us. No intent for sale, just more for building relationships, sharing experiences. The focus right now is innovation and services procurement. So we picked clients that are farther along in the journey, and some that haven't even started or just beginning to start. And really just facilitating that conversation to share best practices, share experiences, what they've done in their industry, how they set up their procurement processes, what worked, what didn't.
Yeah, and I think the thing that strikes me about when these type of conversations happen is, as soon as you get the practitioners in the room, yourself being one of them, and people take a little bit of a while to kind of like warm up to it, but once the conversation starts amongst the practitioners, it's just you're off. And it's great because everybody's talking about what's happening within their programs, they're talking about the challenges within their businesses. You're able to talk about all of the amazing experiences you had at Cox and what you've done in your procurement journey as well. And it's just that kind of sharing of ideas, and that's how the market moves towards best practice. And because it was like a long form conversation, which is why I like doing this type of conversation, it just gives the chance to really get into the detail. The thing I find it quite frustrating a lot of the times if you're at conferences and you have a round table and it's like 10, 15 minutes and then whoosh, turnaround.
Well, you can't get into any meat in those conferences, and you can't even talk about what you're actually there to talk about. By the time you pose a question, you've got one person that has an answer, and then you have the bell and it's gone, and everybody moves on to that next thing. So,
yeah, and I think just the general conversation, it was quite a high level of sophistication of like procurement practitioner chat. Which is great to see, and it allows people to get into the detail of like what is actually making them tick on a day-to-day basis, talking about how it fits with finance, talking about how it fits with strategy, talking about the challenges, and also just people sharing ideas. Oh, how many people are in your team that does this? How do you approach that? And also I think just like the sharing of the problem statement is what I find really interesting, because people will go, oh, that makes me feel better to know that you're in that situation as well. But it's you must see this all the time when you're talking to clients and prospects. There's generally there isn't a high level of maturity across the market when it comes to services procurement.
There's not, unfortunately, especially from a services standpoint of what we do with the clients, right? It's the contingent side is so saturated with MSPs, suppliers, the maturity is there, the technology is there that helps give a level of delivery that the client needs. We don't have that yet on the services procurement side. We have the capabilities, but we don't have the actual clients or the prospective clients. The corporations haven't caught up to realizing what the need is. I believe we talked about a little bit in the last podcast where we were saying your typical procurement person doesn't see the full end-to-end life cycle.
Right.
So they don't understand the pain that finance feels, that your business stakeholder feels, that having to do dispute resolution, manage the vendors, because everything post-signature goes back over the fence to the client or to that engagement layer, and they don't see it unless there's an escalation.
Yeah, and with people talking about how they're approaching from different angles, it's also seeing how they build trust and how the MSP world can build trust in services procurement, because it is a sideways move. And I know a lot of people say, oh, we're already doing X amount in services procurement, but a lot of the stuff is at a very low level of sophistication. It's kind of typically like worker tracking, that sort of resource focused basic administration approach to it, where there is anything in place. But I think seeing the conversation that was going on yesterday, with you kind of, facilitating that from a practitioner point of view, that's getting into much more of the meat of how procurement can add value to their buyers, their engagement managers, as you said, how they can bring value to the business and how they can also bring value into procurement. One of the comments yesterday was that, sometimes it can be a bit of a thankless task, but there's so much value that can be generated, when people are talking about the data and what they can do with the data, where they do capture it and where it isn't just thrown over to the other side and an SOW kind of scanned, signed PDF stuck in a document repository somewhere. There's a whole world you can do with it.
Well, you become, the more mature, I feel like as a procurement organization, you become a better storyteller.
Right.
Because that's what you're doing, right? You're taking that data, you're telling a story with that data to your boundary partners, to your executives. You're building solutions versus just focusing on cost savings. Right? I mean, cost savings is great, but that's not what's going to get your business team to really move the needle and engage you and become more of a strategic partner and involve you up front so you can make those decisions on, what supplier should we use? What are we measuring the performance of that supplier? Making sure those outcomes and deliverables are tightly put together inside those statements, or should it even be in SOW?
Right.
Should it be going somewhere else? Are we looking at a 5 or 6 year time frame for building this? Well, why are we talking about an FTE? Or if it's 6 months, why aren't we talking about a staff aug resource?
Yeah, and so the kind of business case drivers, that was a really interesting part of the conversation, and the way that people are approaching the problem, I thought was also really interesting, which was where we kind of got into the discussion around, okay, all of these problems exist around services procurement, but which ones are most relevant to you? Which was where I'm going to bring in a prop for a second, where we brought in the extremely high-tech wheel of pain. So looking at all angles from rogue spend, misclassification, which is nicely upside down, scoping variations, leveraging AI, governance, performance, direct award versus competitive bidding, lack of visibility, no data for running category strategy, that sort of stuff. So I thought this was quite interesting, seeing where people were going with it. And the thing that I find that is a very useful device is something that certainly from a Zivio point of view, we found very, very useful in conversations, because you and I know that most organizations will have most of those problems, right? But when it comes to the individual organization, the ones that matter to them the most, I mean, even yesterday, there was quite a variation, wasn't there?
Yeah, it's performance management, misclassification, governance, they all very related, but different issues and focuses.
And I think that's what's nice about when I see you having a conversation with practitioners about this. It's not a sales conversation, effectively. It's a consultative conversation. And it's certainly what we try and do as well if we're talking to customers, because with services procurement, it's complex enough. It's not about, you've got to get to the root of the matter for that particular organization. You've got to really understand it. And I've even seen situations where people will say, our services procurement is fine. And then if you actually take them through, well, how do you do this? Or how do you do that? And do you have any issues in any of these areas? People suddenly start going, oh, yeah, that's a massive problem. But if you take it as just as kind of, if you try and approach it as just like, how's your services procurement? People can look at that as like, it's too big. They're in their mind, they're just like, oh, that's too big and complicated. But when you break it down into those specific areas, it really kind of plays into the reality of what they're doing on a day-to-day basis and those pain points that are genuinely affecting them.